Okay, let's go.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Ayaz Vlog CSS. Today we will continue discussing Russia-Ukraine war in part 2 of this vlog on the subject. Going back to 2013 leads us to the real point of eruption. The protests in Ukraine began on November the 21st, 2013 when President Viktor Yanukovych announced the suspension of plans to sign an association agreement with the European Union. This decision triggered a wave of public outrage, leading thousands to gather in Kyiv's Independence Square, calling for greater integration with Europe and demanding an end to corruption. The movement, known as the Revolution of Dignity or Euromaidan, rapidly gained momentum. By December 1st, 2013, over 3 lakh demonstrators filled the streets, making it clear that the people's frustration was palpable. As the protests intensified, the situation escalated further. On January 19, 2014, violent clashes erupted between protesters and police, resulting in injuries and mounting tensions. The turning point came on February 18th, when brutal confrontations led to the deaths of over 100 protesters in just a few days. By February 2nd, Yanukovych fled Kyiv, leaving a power vacuum and deepening political instability. In the aftermath of his ousting, Russia began to exert its influence on Ukraine. On February 28, 2014, unmarked soldiers began taking control of key sites in Crimea. Tensions escalated as pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine started seizing government buildings, leading to a volatile situation. The crisis reached a climax on March 16 when a disputed referendum was held in Crimea, resulting in a reported 97% vote for annexation by Russia. This move was condemned internationally, and on March 18, 2014, Russia officially annexed Crimea, prompting swift sanctions from the West and igniting a conflict that would shape Ukraine's future for years to come. But Putin was not to stop here. In February 2022, President Vladimir Putin escalated his aggressive strategy against Ukraine by launching a large-scale invasion on the 24th, marking a dangerous turning point in the ongoing conflict that had begun in 2014. This invasion was framed by the Kremlin as a necessary action to protect Russian-speaking populations, but it quickly revealed a broader objective: the attempt to reassert Russian dominance in Eastern Europe. By March 2022, the humanitarian crisis had reached alarming proportions, with over 4 million Ukrainians fleeing to neighboring countries and millions more displaced internally. Reports indicated that civilian casualties had surged into thousands, with cities like Mariupol facing devastating bombardments that left infrastructure in ruins. Despite being outnumbered and outraged, Ukraine's military demonstrated remarkable resilience and strategic prowess. By mid-2022, Ukraine had successfully repelled several Russian offensives, particularly around Kyiv and Kharkiv, showcasing the effectiveness of international military aid. Countries such as the United States and the members of the European Union provided significant support, with the US alone committing over $50 billion in military and humanitarian assistance by late 2022. This influx of resources not only bolstered Ukraine's defenses but also fostered a unified spirit, uniting the populace in the face of adversity. As the conflict continued into 2023 and beyond, the situation remained volatile. By January 2023, the war had evolved into a protracted standoff, with both sides entrenched in a brutal war of attrition. Despite calls for negotiations from various international actors, the lack of a viable diplomatic pathway has perpetuated the cycle of violence. The international community remains divided, with some nations advocating for increased military support for Ukraine, while others push for diplomatic resolutions, fearing that continued escalation and standoff could lead to a broader conflict involving NATO and Russia. In May 2025, peace talks resumed in Istanbul, aiming to address the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Despite hopes for a breakthrough, the negotiations ultimately faltered due to deep-seated mistrust and conflicting demands from both sides. Russia insisted on territorial concessions, particularly regarding Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine, while Ukraine remained steadfast in its position to restore its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The talks were further complicated by a series of Russian drone strikes that targeted key Ukrainian infrastructure, increasing tensions and undermining the fragile atmosphere necessary for a meaningful dialogue. On June 6, 2025, Ukraine responded to the continued aggression with a bold operation that involved strikes on Russian air bases. This retaliation aimed to disrupt the logistical capabilities of the Russian military and send a clear message of defiance against ongoing hostilities. The strikes were met with fierce condemnation from Moscow, which vowed to retaliate and increase its military operations in response. Russian officials claimed that these actions would not go unanswered, indicating a potential for further military escalation. As the situation evolves, the trajectory of the conflict remains uncertain. The failure of peace talks and the recent military exchanges signal to a return of heightened hostilities, with both sides entrenched in their positions. The international community watches closely, aware that the ongoing conflict could sprawl into a broader regional conflagration if diplomatic avenues continue to be ignored. The future of Ukraine remains precarious as the possibility of a protracted war looms, with the risk of further destabilization affecting not only Ukraine but the entire European security landscape. As tensions rise and military actions intensify, the need for a credible and effective diplomatic resolution becomes ever more urgent.